Money, the lifeblood of our economies, constantly flows through markets, shops, and our very hands. But its value, ever so elusive, dances to the rhythm of inflation. What if this rhythm settled into a predictable beat? In the world of economics, few topics stir as much debate as the future of inflation. It's a force that can erode savings, reshape investment strategies, and redraw the lines of financial security. But imagine a scenario where inflation doesn't spiral out of control, nor does it plummet into the abyss of deflation. Instead, it holds steady at a constant 3%, forever. Welcome to our discussion, where we'll delve into the provocative notion that inflation could cement itself at a perpetual 3%. Is it a utopian economic vision or a practical prediction amidst a sea of variables? Welcome to Economic Empire, and in this video, we'll explore the complexities of inflation, the arguments for a stable 3% rate, its far-reaching implications, and the counterarguments that challenge this fascinating hypothesis. Join us on this journey through the past, present, and possible future of our economy's silent navigator, inflation. Let's dive into the world where numbers tell tales of stability in an often turbulent financial sea. To truly grasp the implications of a 3% inflation rate forever, we must first unpack what inflation actually is. At its core, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and consequently, how purchasing power is falling. In most countries, inflation is measured by tracking the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which reflects the average price change over time for a basket of goods and services that a typical household might purchase. But what causes inflation? It's a complex interplay of factors such as demand for goods outstripping supply, increases in production costs, or expensive monetary policies. Let's take a brief trip through history. Inflation rates have been known to fluctuate wildly due to wars, economic booms, and policy shifts. The Roaring Twenties, the inflationary aftermath of the World Wars, the stagflation of the 1970s, each era tells a story of how inflation can shape an economy. These fluctuations can have a profound impact. High inflation, or hyperinflation, can devastate savings and make everyday goods unaffordable. On the flip side, deflation can lead to reduced consumer spending, a slowdown in economic growth, and increased debt burdens. With this understanding, the question arises: how can an economy maintain a steady inflation rate like the proposed 3%? And why would this be a desirable target? Central banks around the globe, including the Federal Reserve in the United States, often target an inflation rate of around 2% to 3% as part of their monetary policy, aiming to strike a balance between encouraging spending and investment while safeguarding the value of the currency. But is it realistic to expect this rate to hold steadfast forever? And what mechanisms could potentially lock inflation in this narrow band? In the next section, we'll explore the intriguing 3% inflation theory, sift through the evidence, and analyze whether this could be the new economic normal, or if it's merely wishful thinking. Now that we've established a foundational understanding of inflation, let's delve into the heart of today's discussion: the theory that inflation could stabilize at 3% indefinitely. This 3% figure isn't a number plucked from thin air. It's grounded in economic rationale. For many economists, a moderate inflation rate can be a sign of a healthy economy. It encourages consumers to spend now rather than later, stimulates business investment, and allows for a gradual adjustment of wages. But why 3%? Specifically, proponents of the 3% theory argue that it strikes an optimal balance. It's not so high that it rapidly erodes purchasing power, nor so low that it edges toward deflationary risks. Moreover, the theory is bolstered by several factors that could contribute to a stable inflation rate, such as technological advancements, globalization, and the vigilant monetary policies of central banks. Technological improvements, for instance, tend to reduce production costs over time, which can help temper inflation. Globalization allows for the import of cheaper goods, providing a similar effect. And central banks have become increasingly adept at using tools like interest rates to keep inflation in check. However, the notion of perpetual 3% inflation is not without its critics. Some argue that the unpredictability of economic shocks, like financial crisis or pandemics, makes it impossible to anchor inflation at any specific rate indefinitely. Others question the ability of central banks to precisely manage inflation, especially in the face of political pressures and unforeseen global events. Despite these challenges, the 3% inflation theory remains a topic of considerable interest. It suggests a future where economies can enjoy the benefits of stability and predictability, a future where the specter of runaway inflation or deflationary spirals are kept at bay. As we proceed to the next part of our discussion, we'll examine the potential impact of a stable inflation rate. What would it mean for your wallet, your business, and the broader economy? A stable 3% inflation rate, if it could be sustained, would have profound implications across the economic landscape. Let's explore the potential effects of such an economic constant on various aspects of society. For consumers, the predictability of a constant inflation rate could mean more confidence in long-term financial planning. Mortgages, loans, and savings could be managed with a clearer understanding of future purchasing power. Businesses, too, could benefit from this stability. With less uncertainty about future costs and prices, companies might find it easier to make investment decisions, set long-term strategies, and manage inventory levels. From the perspective of wage earners, a steady inflation rate could lead to more predictable wage growth, allowing individuals to negotiate salaries that keep pace with the cost of living. Governments and policymakers could also navigate with a bit more ease. A predictable inflation scenario would allow for more informed fiscal policy, tax strategy, and public spending, potentially leading to greater macroeconomic stability. In the realm of investments, a stable inflation rate could reduce the volatility of certain asset classes. For example, the bond market, which is particularly sensitive to inflation expectations, could see more consistent yields. However, it's crucial to recognize that even a stable inflation rate does not benefit everyone equally. Savers, particularly those relying on fixed-income investments, could find their returns diminished in real terms over time. Furthermore, while some degree of inflation is generally seen as a sign of a healthy economy, if wages do not keep up with inflation, even a stable rate can lead to a decrease in the standard of living for certain segments of the population. And internationally, a country with a stable and moderate inflation rate might become more attractive to foreign investors, potentially strengthening its currency and altering trade dynamics. As we contemplate these various implications, it's evident that a stable inflation rate can serve as both a boon and a challenge, depending on one's position in the economy and the responsiveness of other economic variables. In the next section, we'll consider some counterarguments and critiques. Can we realistically achieve and maintain this economic ideal, or are we chasing an elusive dream? While the prospect of a perpetually stable 3% inflation rate offers a vision of economic equilibrium, it's a scenario met with skepticism and critical analysis from various quarters. Let's delve into some of the counterarguments and critiques that challenge this theory. Firstly, critics argue that the economy is an inherently dynamic system, influenced by unpredictable forces such as political changes, technological breakthroughs, and global events. These variables can disrupt even the most well-calibrated economic models. For instance, the notion that central banks can fine-tune inflation to a precise figure is seen by some as overly optimistic. History has shown that monetary policy can sometimes lead to unintended consequences, including asset bubbles or liquidity traps. Furthermore, critics point out that a fixed inflation target does not account for the natural ebb and flow of the business cycle. In times of recession, for example, a higher inflation target might be necessary to kickstart growth, while during booms, a lower rate could help cool off an overheating economy. There's also the question of wage growth. Even if inflation is stable, if wages do not keep up, the purchasing power of the average worker could stagnate or decline, widening economic inequality. Some economists also challenge the desirability of a 3% rate, suggesting that a lower target could be more appropriate in certain contexts, particularly in advanced economies with slower growth and aging populations. Even the role of technology and globalization, often cited as deflationary pressures that could help stabilize inflation, can be double-edged swords. They may lead to job displacement and increased competition, with complex effects on the broader economy. Lastly, there's the element of psychological expectations. Inflation targets can influence the public's expectations, which in turn affect price-setting behavior, potentially leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy that could derail the target. These counterarguments and critiques highlight the monumental challenge of maintaining a stable inflation rate. They remind us that economic policy is as much an art as it is a science, requiring constant vigilance and flexibility. In our next segment, we'll look at real-world case studies and examples where inflation rates have remained relatively stable and what lessons we might learn from these scenarios. Let's ground our discussion in reality by examining case studies where inflation rates have held steady, offering us a glimpse into the practicalities and nuances of achieving inflation targets. Consider the example of Turkey, which maintained an inflation rate close to 3% over a decade through a combination of stringent monetary policies, fiscal discipline, and structural reforms. These cases, while not without their challenges, show that prolonged periods of stable inflation are not merely theoretical constructs but achievable realities, given the right conditions and policy responses. As we turn our gaze to the future, we must consider the factors that could influence the trajectory of inflation. Advancements in technology, shifting demographics, and the evolving nature of work all play a role in shaping our economic destiny. The role of central banks will continue to be pivotal. Their ability to adapt to new economic realities and effectively communicate their policies will be critical in managing inflation expectations and actual inflation rates. Unforeseen events, such as geopolitical conflicts or natural disasters, can also disrupt economic stability, reminding us that the pursuit of a perfect inflation rate is an exercise in adaptability and resilience. Our journey through the concept of a perpetual 3% inflation rate reveals the intricacies and interconnectedness of economic policy, market forces, and societal trends. While the idea of a stable inflation rate is appealing, it is clear that the economic landscape is subject to a multitude of influences, some predictable, others less so. We've seen that achieving and maintaining any inflation target, let alone a permanent one, is fraught with challenges and requires a delicate balance of policy, foresight, and sometimes a bit of luck. Whether or not inflation will be 3% forever remains an open question, one that will undoubtedly continue to spark debate among economists, policymakers, and the public. If you found our exploration into the world of inflation thought-provoking, we invite you to join the conversation. Share your views in the comments below. Do you think inflation can be stabilized at 3% indefinitely, or are we facing a future of economic unpredictability? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated with our latest economic analyses and deep dives.